Academy for our use.
Hello.
Oh,
Hi, everyone.
That was exactly the right amount of dramatic entrance that we need to start our presentation.
Yeah, if it's any less, we just can't do it.
yeah.
Hello and welcome to Loremaker's Guide to 2949.
All right. And I guess we'll go down the round. I'm Dave Haddock, narrative director at CIG.
I'm Will Weissbaum, lead writer.
And I am Cherie Heiberg, archivist.
So we are very, very proud to present something special at this camp.
Well, actually, before we get to that, though, Jared wanted us to let you know that we're going to be doing a live Q&A afterwards. So if you have questions percolating or things you want to lob at us, we'll be over there with him once we're done. But yes, as Will said, we are really, really excited. We've been working on this for a really long time, working with some lyricists and choreographers to bring you a very special edition of Star Watch Live.
Yep.
Very excited.
We've heard the requests.
Yeah, we know you love it, so we're going to keep bringing it back over.
It's our favorite show, so.
Yeah, so we're kidding, of course. Today we're going to talk about bartenders' liens. It's also very exciting, something we're very passionate about.
We're going to get a guy to host it.
Yeah.
Just kidding again.
But anyway, yeah, so on to the real stuff. This is Loremaker's Guide to 2949. So in a nutshell, what we're looking to do today is we're kind of breaking this up and wanted to give you guys kind of a sense of what the narrative team kind of fictionally is looking to kind of tackle in the coming year.
And by starting that and by kind of taking a snapshot at the high-level story of where we are in the universe right now.
Yeah, so, for a lot of you, this will probably be review, but it's, always good, always helpful to try it. So just to kind of run through kind of where the universe is at right now, we're currently enmeshed in a really, really bad military conflict with the Vanduul in response to their attack on Vega 2, which is kind of a drag.
But
Yeah,
it works.
the Vanduul are kind of an interesting enemy for the UE. Because they are their decentralized structure, they have all these clans that keep striking at different areas. They've been very hard for the UE to wage kind of a unified war effort against.
It's a sort of unconventional warfare thing, so it's not really something that...
Yeah, no central leadership, so, hard.
A little tricky.
Yeah.
It's the height of their attacks came when the UE just overthrew Messer, and they were very hesitant to start getting involved in a new Xeno war once again. And plus, it's kind of this pattern where the Vanduul do these small skirmish attacks, and then they do like a very big attack and kick us out of a system like Orion or Tiber or Virgil, and then they'll go away after they've done that, and just again with the small skirmishes. So it's kind of been building and building and building until, Vega 2.
Right.
Yeah. But unfortunately, there's sort of a weird side effect of that is because the military sort of diverted most of their resources over to kind of fuel the Vanduul war effort, it's left kind of local law enforcement a little bit stretched as far as support goes. So that's kind of the stuff that you guys have been actively taking a part in on both sides of the equation. With the increase of crime. So needless to say, like as law enforcement kind of turns to the civilian populace to kind of help fill in the gaps, that's why we're getting a lot of bounty missions and mercenary missions, and Crusader Security is desperately looking for you guys to help. And for those of you who like to steal, this is your time.
Yeah, because normally in the ideal situation, you have a thing where the advocacy kind of identify the criminals, they find the large outlaw nest, and then they coordinate with the military, the Navy, to kind of clear them out. And that's kind of the part that's a little stretched on and can no longer achieve to such effect, and where they're looking for militias and civilians to step up and do their part to protect the empire.
Yeah.
It's just so big, guys.
Space is big. Yes, everyone remember that. And again, there's also what was known as Project Archangel, but is the synth world, which has been kind of a huge financial vampire latched onto the Empire's throat.
I can visualize that.
Yeah.
Yeah, started way back in 2872. It was kind of this response to, for a long time, humanity, as we expanded across the universe, we have terraformed planets, and a major effect of terraforming is we alter a planet's temperature, atmosphere, all this stuff, and most of the native life is wiped out. It's part of the process. And that's been kind of upsetting to people because we started realizing that we were wiping out sentient species along the way. And so that started like the Fair Chance Act.
Exactly, yeah.
Which you know a lot about from all the Fair Chance Act
do.
systems.
That was one of the earliest things that the UEE established after the fall of the Messer regime. I think it was under Imperator Aaron Toy. It was the first one who was not a Messer in hundreds of years.
So kind of like the next step in that protecting these resources has been the idea, what if humans no longer needed to terraform worlds altogether? And that's where kind of Synth World came in, a full artificial planet. Not just like a space station that we could live in, which as comfortable as they can be, it's still not the same as living on a planet.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Yeah, you don't get that kind of like home identification as you do with the planet. So yes, they've been sort of undertaking this Herculean task of developing the undevelopable, and for better or worse, now they're sort of locked into it. So it's a constant source of debate because it's eating up so much money and resources and stuff like that, and they still haven't quite figured out if it's something they can actually do.
it's like the UE's equivalent of like the space race. Like it's brought a lot of technological achievements to the empires. They dumped all this research money into it, and it's quite a feat of engineering. But it's just not clear if it's going to happen.
Yeah, like is it the sunk cost fallacy at this point?
Oh,
or is it going to
100%.
come to fruition?
Yeah, and they've given up so much money that at this point they can't. It's tough to kind of just cut bait because they've sunk so much into it.
So with all those costs, the economy is a big thing, and so along with that, we have new expanded trade with the Xi'an, with the recent passing of the Human-Xi'an Trade Initiative. I mean, from the time of the Messers, we've been kind of at a Cold War with the Xi'an, where tensions were very high, and with the fall of the Messers, that began to thaw out. And it's been a very long and slow process to get to this point where we're starting to really trade and deal with the Xi'an, because a lot of them were alive back then, so they kind of remembered us being jerks, which is really entertaining to me.
Yeah, Emperor Krei especially was born like right near the start of the Messer era, and Emperor Krei's like, no, you guys. I remember this.
So we see like big steps forward, like the Minsk agreement.
Yep.
And then we've also have like Xi'an companies opening in the UE for the first time with like CTR and a few others. And so now we have this trade agreement in place.
Yeah, APOA releasing human-converted ships now openly with humans is definitely marking a new era in sort of human-Xi'an relations, which is pretty exciting. Which also expands out to some of the other aliens. We had a big event a couple years ago where the first Tavaran senator was elected to Senate.
Kasi.
Yep,
Love that
Suchkasi.
I voted for him.
Keep
Yeah.
fighting. Which the Tavaran, as you know, obviously we fought in 2 wars, assimilated into our society, has been sort of an interesting portion of our populace, because most of them have just been sort of rejecting everything and just kind of like sulking and just kind of being really angry.
I mean, fair.
And Kasi sort of represented a new ideology among them, where he believed that the Tavaran needed to accept the fact that they've been sort of assimilated into the UEE, and they need to start doing their part.
Take their full place.
Yeah, as citizens in the UEE, that they need to kind of be stepping up, which
Yeah.
was kind of a radical idea and kind of brought out a lot of weirdness in people and stuff like that. But he served in the army, and then because of his service in the army, he was actually recruited into the Navy. So he crossed over. He won a Medal of Valor. He was like a kind of a war hero, basically. And still serves as a naval reservist, so he was kind of an interesting guy to sort of jump into the Senate.
And the other kind of side of Tavaran development is, in addition to the becoming more assimilated and taking on more responsibility within the empire, there's also those who are looking to reclaim their lost heritage and their lost culture. So there's Tavarans who are looking back to their roots of rediscovering the Rajora, which was lost for all intents and purposes except for human historians who kind of preserved it in the wake of the wars. And now we're starting to see Tavaran communities spring up, like there's one in Tyrannus 3, where they're really trying to be Tavaran first, which is making a lot of people very nervous. Though a lot of humans are also supportive of it because, hey, we kind of did something a little bit crappy to these people, even though they were our enemies at the time.
They were the aggressors.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
It is complicated. And I, for one, love the Tavaran them that are trying to reclaim their heritage. Like, go guys.
Very gray.
Yeah.
And last one, obviously, this is one of the best things to hear you guys debate, is the separation of Terra and Earth, that kind of rivalry. Of course, Terran separatists have been advocating that they should move the capital of the UEE from Earth to Terra as a symbol that humanity is now a progressive spacefaring species. So the one thing we should do, the best way to kind of symbolize that, is to cut our ties with basically the kind of the awful history that Earth has represented, and while still acknowledging it as our home world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Terra is kind of our new beacon of how we want to behave and how we want to be seen throughout the other cultures and stuff like that, which, needless to say, they get a lot of pushback on.
Oh, tons.
Yeah, and then there's also a deeper history buried into this, where they not only want to move the capital, but there's a group of kind of Terrans who think that Terra altogether should be apart from the UEE. And the step one of that is moving the capital, and then step two will be to kind of
sovereignty from
break apart from there. Like in 2638, there was like a senator who brought this to the Senate, and it did not pass, but that's been kind of like brewing in the background ever since.
Yeah, to the sort of traditionalists, it's sort of a slippery slope. You give them an inch, they might take a mile.
So this is kind of everything that's brewing and percolating right now in 2949, and a big part of what got us there was good old Imperator
Kilos Costigan.
Yeah.
Kilos Costigan.
And so this transition into this phase of our presentation was actually kind of brought on by us appearing on Inside Star Citizen with that guy. And one of the community questions was very interesting, which was, hey, Imperator Costigan is supposed to serve for 10 years. Imperators are only supposed to serve a single term. It's 2949. Isn't he about to get out of office? To which we were like, oh.
He sure is.
Time flies.
That's a good point.
So yeah, it's something we've had in the background of our head, but it really reminded us that this is a ticking clock that we need to look at, and we got kind of excited when we were talking through the end of Costigan's time in office and what we could do with that. So before we get to the next steps, let's talk a little bit about Costigan himself and his legacy in office, which, other than being like a poster that you see around the universe in, when you go visit Rudo, he's done a couple big things along the way in his time. He's a member of the Universalist Party. He was an economic strategist for 2 decades before joining the Senate and then becoming High Secretary. And he, while serving as High Secretary, he attempted to run for Imperator in 2928. And that was a failed attempt, and he did not win. But he kept at it, and the Universalists gained control again. And in 2940, he was successfully elected as Imperator, and he's been serving there for the past 9 years.
So aside from that, he was also obviously in charge when the attack of Vega 2 happened, and in basically response to it, authorized the recognition of Vega 2 as a recognized planet. So basically, they had been kind of lobbying for recognition before the attack, and after the attack, basically they kind of fast-tracked it, basically as a way for him to say to the people of Vega 2, like, hey, look, you guys got really messed up in that, and we're going to stand by you. We're not going to abandon you. You're part of the empire.
I mean, if you think about how many times humanity has fallen back and have abandoned their systems in the face of the Vanduul threat, like this was a big stake in the ground with this recognition of Vega 2, because a lot of people were kind of expecting, this is going to happen again, and with Bishop coming forward and this move, and then the declaration of official war against the Vanduul.
Yeah. And also in the wake of that, because of the war and what we were talking about earlier about crime, he introduced several measures to kind of deputize the population, the civilian population, to kind of assist with law enforcement and security by introducing the Militia Mobilization Act and resurrecting what's called the Civil Defense Force, which is sort of a program underneath advocacy where they can kind of deputize civilians to help kind of combat crime if they need it.
Yeah, this is a relatively recent initiative, so 2946 it was passed, and so we're still seeing the ripples of this kind of push forward. There's always been militias. Planets have always instituted militias to protect their worlds, but now it's taking them to the next level and relying more and more for entire system safety on these military organizations.
So in a nutshell, what was sort of pointed out to us kind of presented an idea of, well, we need to take a look at our government. Like we've sort of been taking it for granted for this time that we have an imperator who's established, who's a character, who's being made fun of by a hacker in GrimHacks, but they got to go. So how do we transition out of this? So we basically started kind of taking a look at the government and how the government is sort of structured and organized, and basically kind of started asking the questions of, where does the High Secretary come from? Who nominates the High Advocate? Stuff like that. So just to kind of refresher for anybody who needs it, this is sort of the rough hierarchy of the UEE with your Imperator at the top, and then the High Secretary, who's in charge of the Senate, and that branch is sort of responsible for the infrastructure and kind of the laws and legislation, stuff like that. And then you have High Command, which is sort of very similar to kind of the Joint Chief of Staff, if you're familiar with the American military paradigm, but where the leaders of the Navy, the Marines, and the Army all kind of form this group that represents what used to be the High General position. And then the High Advocate, who's in charge of basically like the justice system, so the advocacy, the prisons, the courts, all that stuff, all that kind of enforcement. So, as we said, the Imperator is only allowed to serve one single 10-year sentence because they're terrified of having another messer, so they put in all of these obstacles that would prevent another one from coming to light. So, in a nutshell, that actually kind of opened up the doors where we were like, okay, so what is the process?
Right.
Like, what is the electoral process in the empire, particularly because you're dealing with a bunch of factors that, we don't have to deal with now of, dozens and dozens of systems, dozens of, hundreds of planets. People are moving constantly between star systems. How do you keep track of it? How do you, all that stuff? And so we kind of broke down
Blood
kind of
sports. Just
basically it was just a battle royale.
Blood sports.
Yeah, blood sports all the time.
Yeah, or Thunderdome, as we call it. That's a working title.
No, but more seriously, this.
Yeah.
Oh, democratic process, actually.
Yeah.
not the blood.
Not blood.
Well, there's some blood.
So basically, the way we kind of have worked it out was, again, there was sort of this idea, if you've heard us talk about kind of the government as a character, as a personality, this sort of idea that post-Messer, they were there was a huge desire to be progressive, to be seen as progressive, because it's sort of that we're not that anymore. We'll do anything in our power to make sure that we don't look like that anymore.
Yeah, and if you think about the history of how did the Imperator come to being? Like when Messer just came into power, he first became prime citizen, and then he's like, you know what, I'm actually Imperator, and declared it on himself, formed the United Empire of Earth at that moment. And ever since then, it was just him and his kids taking the role. And so at the transition point, after the fall of the Messers, where Aaron Toy first proposed this new position, there was a lot of debate back and forth. And we get this question a lot. If the UEE was so terrible under the Messers and the Imperator represents so much bad, why did that persevere into the modern form of government? And I think at one point it was very questionable at that transition point whether the government, the humanity as a whole, was going to stay united in the face of all that had happened. In a lot of ways, because there were still a lot of loyalists going around, still in support of the Messer regime. He was unpopular, but there was a lot of people who made a lot of money underneath him and who still were tied to that old regime. And so a big compromise was that this is still that same empire. It's just heading in a new direction. So it was kind of easing people into the future without shattering everything that had built.
Yeah, they didn't want to kind of make too abrupt of a turn that would make people think like we've lost everything, we're kind of spiraling out of control. Because they had a lot to rebuild after that, because they had a lot of, the Messers were very firmly entrenched, and so kind of ripping out all of their influence was very, very difficult. So they needed to have a government working and in place while they were doing that. So that's why sort of the title kind of survived. But that's why they also put in all those obstacles to prevent people to create as many different things that would prevent somebody from being able to kind of assume that kind of power again.
And so it relies at this election system with all the checks and balances. So we're already in our very exciting election cycle for the year 2950. So it starts at Citizen Day, and it lasts till the next Citizen Day when voting starts. Well, it goes beyond that, but the big final vote goes to the next Citizen Day. And that's because Citizen Day is the day where people get sworn in as new citizens, and it's to ensure that these new citizens get to participate in the electoral process when they come on board, rather than having to wait a full another decade before they can vote.
Because also, as you know, citizens are the only ones who can vote for the imperator. Civilians can't. They can only vote in local elections. The highest level they can vote is a governor of their planet, but that's about it.
So at the start of this process, there is this all call, and basically it's very egalitarian where everyone can participate, even you, Cherie.
Even me.
So the idea is that they want new voices. They want fresh people to be able to feel empowered to try and kind of make a run at being imperator. You don't have to be sort of an entrenched politico, even though, as we all know, those tend to kind of have a lot of clout already. So they tend to make it easy. But the idea was that the sort of opening phase would be an opportunity for anybody, any citizen here could basically put together a video where they're talking about their ideology of like how they would handle certain issues, what their platform is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they just dump it on basically like the Spectrum, the government Spectrum page, basically. And people get to vote on it. You just need 1,000 signatures, do it, and then you're in. And so basically the first wave of election is massive. It's probably thousands of candidates that you can sift through. And then, of course, it starts to kind of wheedle down from there. But
which is why it tends to favor the existing parties when they get that recommendation, the backing of a major party like the Universalists or Centralists. Those people tend to do well because they have a lot of weight behind them.
They already have some clout.
But there's been a lot of surprises. And so we whittle that huge group down to 10 people, and it doesn't have to be like one from each party either. If you could end up with 10 transitionalists all on the ticket.
Yeah.
And from the 10, we go down to the next primary to 5, and then final 5 are the main election that we see. Ghost.
Yeah, there was a ghost. So basically, in a nutshell, we're going to be having an election.
So the big focus of next year, 2950, is going to be an election cycle that we're hope to get you involved in. And so you'll see a lot of the lore that we post onto the website and to Spectrum and in Jump Point, kind of relating back to this overarching storyline.
Yeah.
And so moving into that, we kind of looking at the next steps is what's coming up. So we have a list here of kind of what are the big issues that these candidates are going to be facing. And we hit a lot of these at the opening in the State of the Union. So the postings, like the Van Duel, the big question is, okay, we're at war now. What does the end of that war look like? How are these new imperators going to pursue it? Is it the complete annihilation of the Van Duel? Is it just the retaking of those border systems? Is it
completely withdrawing?
Yeah, do you have a peace treaty with the Van Duel? So these are the things that people are going to be putting forth.
Please, peace treaty. That would be so funny to watch.
They have crime, and so there's a lot of differing opinions on crime with do we put more money towards the advocacy? Do we expand civilian roles in it? With Synthworld, do we...
Lots of opinions on Synthworld.
Do we yank the plug on that bad boy?
Do we keep investing more in our relationships with other species, or do we pull back into humanity's own self?
Oh yeah. How much Tevran are going to affect the next election cycle? That's the interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, Kasi might have a huge influence. There might be a huge surgence of Tavaran candidates who are suddenly going to take a bit. So.
There's a question of decentralization, where you see systems like Stanton, where all of you are hanging out, where these are privately owned planets, but they're thriving. And the question is, does the UEE need to be doing as much as it's doing right now? Could we have smaller government and still thrive? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, where should the capital be? Shout out your answer right now.
Dara!
A lot of Terran.
That's what I thought.
So these are the things that we're going to kind of hear about in debates and other things, but let's meet a few of the candidates. So we have the three major parties that we've talked about in the writer's guide and other things like that. If you
Yeah, so there's the Universalists who are sort of the kind of blue blood institution-focused kind of ideology. They're basically like kind of strongly believe that government and systems are sort of the ultimate paradigm and will kind of guide the people. Centralists who are kind of a little bit more libertarian, who it's about, weirdly enough, it's about kind of sustaining the status quo, but it's excelling through the values of humanity. Sort of embrace the past, be proud of where you came from. Obviously, they're sort of Earth supporters. And then there's the transitionalists who, unsurprisingly, they kind of tout themselves as sort of the People's Party. They're formed around, a very, very progressive agenda. Obviously, they're looking very much towards the future. They want to move, the capital to Terra. They want to kind of open up like even more kind of trade and relations with the Xi'an, with the Banu. Uplift the Tavaran even more, probably strike a peace accord with the Vandal if they could, and don't get stabbed and eaten.
And so from this, we have a few people that we're going to be introducing. Now, this isn't the entire pool of candidates that you're going to be meeting, but these are just some of the ones that we wanted to highlight for you today. So the first one is Titus Costigan, who is our current Imperator's youngest son. He has not worked in government before. He has come from the business sector. He worked with Schumann for a while on the board of directors. And he is very much has a focus on the economy, just like his dad. He wants to spur growth. He's about decentralization. He thinks that more and more of the government can be handed off to businesses. If you watch the talk on prisons, you can see an example of that, of how we privatize the prison system in some regards. And so he thinks that's the future of the UEE.
But unfortunately, obviously, there's a sort of question of nepotism on that one, because people are a little afraid of having Kilos Costigan as the Imperator and then his son be the next Imperator.
It sounds awfully familiar.
Yeah, so everyone's
We've done that before.
a little worried about how that could turn out. So the next one is actually Ilyana Sherrod, who's sort of she's currently serving, you've seen her pop up in several short stories, is the current High Secretary under Costigan. The sort of assumption would be that she would get sort of his nod endorsement as a candidate, but she's a Universalist. She's from Borea, but she's also she's very focused on the economy, but with a huge skew towards security. So she wants to heavily promote kind of defense spending and investing in that type of stuff, because basically humanity can thrive if there's a really strong sense of security. If people feel safe, they'll spend.
Like how wars generate a lot of jobs, and that kind of idea is that we're at war now, we should be embracing it and spending more and more of the taxes withdrawn in to drum up the security in the systems and to start that war machine turning to get back to the glory days of the empire.
But she also has a somewhat, what would be sort of a controversial policy that she'd sort of like to enact of, obviously, the government has sort of social services and stuff like that can help people out, and she's trying to institute basically this idea of, if you take advantage of it, like that the government will take care of you when you're down, but when you're not and you're back on your feet, you have to pay back what you took, basically.
Yeah, you want to sleep in public housing, you're going to be doing work for the government in order to pay that back.
Yeah. So obviously, it's going to be fun to write some debates on that one. Next is Mira No, who, if you are big fans of Congress Now, you'd probably recognize. She's a transitionist.
Transitionalist?
God, it's so hard.
Anyway,
she's a senator of Terra. She's been introducing legislation to try to, in Senate, to actually move the capital to Terra. It got shot down. She tried to destroy the sort of standard Earth time thing and change it to sort of a more standard time that incorporates all the planets' rotational cycles, which sounded like a logistical nightmare. So that one fell apart.
She was one of the leading voices fighting against the proposed Amendment 27, which was going to say that senators could only be human, which she was like, no.
No. She's trying to outlaw terraforming, so obviously she's kind of in support of the synth world, so take that for what you will. So yeah, she'll be an interesting one to follow as well.
We have Emma Thorne, who is the current Deputy Assistant Director of the Advocacy, and she is another big security hawk, and her big thing is that we need to beef up the advocacy roles in the systems. Like, we can't rely on civilians. They are not trained for the job. It is important that we need bigger and stronger advocacy patrolling out there to keep.
Yeah, it's sort of it's a kind of an interesting, like, populist focus thing, because to her it's the idea is that you, as the civilians, it shouldn't be your responsibility to fight criminals in your hometown. Like, that should be the job of law enforcement. They should be taking care of that. You shouldn't need to put your lives on the line for it. So,
and she's also a big proponent of, once we retake the human systems lost to the Vanduul, that should be the stop. We should not be pursuing a further aggressive agenda, that it should just be about claiming our territory and stopping there.
yeah.
And then finally, the last one we're going to mention for today.
Is Calvin Derry, who is an independent local militia guy who is running on a human-first platform. So he is trying to restrict alien rights. He's basically trying to kick everybody out of the UEE. He's backed by some somewhat nebulous, shifty people.
Let's keep Earth things for Earthlings.
Yeah. Nice.
That's not mine.
Well, all right. Well, we know what his campaign slogan is going to be.
Yeah.
So that's sort of it in a nutshell. So that's, again, sort of the idea of what we're sort of looking to get into. And obviously, like Will said, we want to obviously engage you guys as much in this sort of process, so to make it fun and make it feel inviting and interesting and whatnot.
So that you can kind of help direct the shape of things to come.
Yeah.
Like we've seen in the past, we've done like Stoddard polls before, where we ask your opinion on stuff like that. So expect more of that to come.
Yeah. And so that brings us actually to our next point, which is also another aspect of something that we have been working on and we'll continue to be working on in the new year. And I'm going to slide
I assume this
Cherie.
is a complete surprise that you guys aren't expecting.
You had no idea this was coming.
From watching earlier.
So we made the Galactapedia. It's yeah, I know it's been a long time coming. It's definitely a labor of love. We've worked on it for years. So before we get into it in depth, it looks like we have switched to the live website, which you already know exists. So we may as well just take the tour through here. So the Galactapedia is a repository of information about the Star Citizen universe. It's written with the idea that you are someone who lives in the universe and you are accessing a live encyclopedia that is maintained by the ARC in the TIAC system, the library, the big like space station library that's kind of trying to preserve all the information in the universe that's known about life, about civilizations.
Yeah. And I know you're wondering, do you have to be quiet when visiting it? Yes.
Very quiet.
Very quiet. Yeah, they're very
quiet. It is meant to be utilized both in-game and out-of-game. We are first debuting it here as a web-based platform. As you can see, we have all kinds of wonderful categories. You can click here. You can view all the categories that we have up so far. As we add more articles to the encyclopedia, to the Galactapedia, these categories will expand. Right now, this represents the scope of 200 articles that we have up right now. We have, if I can click here, let's click on this. Which section shall we explore? Let us explore.
And just to reiterate, that's a big thing of that. This is going to be a continually growing knowledge base.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as you probably are aware, there's a lot going on in Star Citizen, so it's going to take us a while to catch up with our backlog, but we're working hard on it, and so.
But yeah, we wanted to kind of create a centralized place for you guys to come and kind of be able to dig into what are the various weird terms we keep throwing at you, and who are the weird people that we have fighting you and stuff like that.
Right. Here's an example of kind of the standard size article that we have put up so far. It's about 1 or 2 paragraphs long normally. We made them this length so that we could get as much information out there as possible to you as quickly as possible. And in most articles, you can click on a related link to keep exploring the topic if you just want to wander around for a while. We have a lot of our spacecraft up by now, and if you prefer not to do it by related articles, you can choose to do the next article in alphabetical order. You can see what's next in the same category. You can see what's next in the same tag, and I'll get into explaining tags in just a moment. Or you can see what's next you can also see what's next alphabetically, but again. And here's an example. Those of you who subscribe to Jump Point will already be familiar with the full-length Galactapedia articles. Additionally, as we expand, we do more content drops with the paragraph link. We will be expanding existing articles so that they are just as long as this. that have just as much detail. So it won't just be one paragraph. It'll be like a huge depth of information about any subject that you can think of that we have put up.
And the bottom of the page is one of my favorite things about it, of just like being able to get lost in our lore a little bit, of like discovering these associated places and just keep reading and reading. So that's been really fun for me.
Yeah, you can skip around using this lovely little table of contents system. And let me show you, let's go back to the home page, and let me show you the tag system. So categories are kind of like a broad scope of a subject. It's like how you can have a subject called holidays. But if you want to get into the tags, it kind of is like faceted system. It's based on the Library of Congress's faceted cataloging system. Whereas you drill deeper, you want to tag it so you can explore something specific. Like instead of holidays, maybe you want to explore UEE holidays or Banu holidays or Xi'an holidays. It gets really deep into the nitty-gritty.
We love holidays.
Oh, love holidays.
Cherie, what do you have a master's degree in again?
I have a master's degree in library science.
That's right.
That's one of the reasons that I started working here, was so that I could design a system for you that is intuitive but also useful. So I can click here on the Bangle tag if it loads. All right, here instead.
Oh, CIG tradition of live demos right there.
Yeah, indeed. So how about let's go to one of my favorite articles. I'm going to do alphabetically. Let's see what Ivar Messer is up to. Oh, there he is, from that poster that you may all be familiar with, the propaganda poster during the First Tevarin War. If you look at all the tag system here, you can click on the Messer dynasty, which is my shorthand for all the Messer family. And you can see all the articles, all the Messers that we have up so far. We have 9 of them up so far. You can click on, let's say, Livia Messer, the third. And you can see that here she is. I don't know if you've heard. Have you heard of Livia Messer before?
Any big Livia Messer fans out there?
Anyone here?
Oh yeah, we got.
Oh yeah, there we go. We got a Livia lover right there. She was the third Messer, and hopefully soon, in the next couple of weeks, we will get all the Messers up, so you will know each horrible dictator who has
horrible person.
Yeah, indeed. All right, let's go back home here. That about covers the system. Oh, I wanted to go over the main page real quick. So we're always going to have a featured article up right here. It's going to change. We haven't talked about the scheduling, but I'm hoping we can change it once a week. Right now, our featured article is the tortoise that you all know and love. That's oh, yeah. And we also have little trending articles, so you can tell what people are clicking on. I hope that you're exploring based on what drives you, but maybe people are clicking on links to articles based on what's happening in the lore.
So those are the most viewed articles, like at the time?
Exactly.
Okay.
These are the most viewed articles at the time. And since we've only viewed a few so far from this particular console, so, but it'll hopefully change on a day-to-day basis. We also put up this in the news section, so if there's something going on in lore, we can refer to it without breaking your immersion. I posted up Anvil Aerospace.
Oh, the sponsors of this year's CitizenCon.
Oh,
Indeed. We know and love them. They do great stuff. This guy was recently updated. We replaced the picture with something better. So every time we update an article, you're going to see it posted right here. There's a random article if you just like to explore. And you can see which one you recently viewed right here. It'll change based on your clicking habits. And if you would like to explore it, you can, because it's live right now.
It's right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we hope you all get on there and get to try it out for yourself. It's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to basically be scheduling kind of new content drops, kind of, I think,
Right.
weekly, so we can kind of keep expanding the number of entries that are in there, and then ultimately down the road be able to build those out, as Cherie said.
Yes, and we built it from the ground up to be able to integrate easily with MobiGlass, so you'll be able to view the Galactapedia in-game as well as out-of-game.
Yeah, and also ultimately they're going to work on integrating it into star map. So if you're on the star map and you see a name of a person mentioned in the description, you can click on that, and that will take you to the Galactapedia article. So it all kind of weaves together,
No.
which is super cool.
Really, full hats off to Cherie for leading this effort and a Herculean task.
Yeah, Cherie was the sort of driving force behind this, along with the awesome people at Turbulent.
Yes, and Ben Lesnick helped me write some of the entries. He contributed roughly, I would say, a fourth of the entries up right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so basically, I mean, obviously, get out there and try it out. Hopefully, you guys dig it, and obviously, let us know if there's anything that you see that you think should be different.
I don't know if that's done. We should get a feedback page going.
Yeah, we should get a feedback page.
We'll do that.
We'll put that up next week.
We'll hop on that. But anyway,
I'm sure you'll let us know what's wrong.
And I'd love to hear what do you want to see on the Galactapedia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
And now we're gonna
transition over to.
We're gonna go over there.
We're gonna go over there.
All right.
Come to me.
Thanks for everything.
Thank you. All right, everyone.
Hope you have some questions.
Hold on while we.
All right, guys. Now we only have 4 minutes before Sean's panel starts.
It's okay.
So come on over. We're gonna have a little area up here. If there's a light that pops up, we'll actually take some questions. Anybody in the crowd? You got a question to ask? We got 4 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, depending on when Sean is ready.
I mean, we can still do this while Sean's talking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do this right on.
Just we can talk over him.
Yeah, just
Do
love
it
it.
all
You
the
also
time.
meet them in the back.
Yeah.
We'll just do running commentary on Sean.
Oh man, there's nothing sadder than a spotlight and an empty mic. Oh yeah, here we go.
Hi.
I love your helmet so much.
Thank you. That's a weird thing to say to somebody, but okay. Will we be the ones determining the outcome of the election, or if we're voting for a joke candidate, are you going to steer it away?
You're gonna influence us, but it is gonna be kind of a narrative-driven thing. We want to hear your opinions.
Yeah,
just like in all things.
Yeah, I mean, again, we'll as we get closer, I think we'll figure out kind of how it breaks down. But yeah, we want your guys' input on it because that'll, again, just to kind of drive the experience. But yeah, I mean, we won't let like people write in votes. Rudo for Imperator, Parker Terrell for Imperator, stuff.
Oh man, that's a good idea.
My opinion is transitionist rules. So.
Who?
Oh yeah. Love him.
Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you.
Jared Huckabee for Imperator.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for your work and all the ideas and the love inside of the history.
You're welcome.
And one question is there any movement of democracy in the Stanton system because it's not represented in the government?
They technically can't be recognized by the government.
No, it's the company's own.
Yeah, so since they're companies, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely talk among the governments in Stanton that they need to might have to band together because of the crime problem getting out of control. But yeah, the government's pretty much like put the kibosh on them ever getting representation just because they can't separate the sort of corporate interest from the interest of the people. So,
Yeah, right.
So yeah, so.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation that's kind of bubbling up because of the crime that is kind of brewing there and their difficulties in handling it. And it's going to be curious to see where it heads.
It'll be fun.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Jared.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. One of the things I wanted to ask while we're getting somebody else up there, integration with the star map. I noticed, ARC, Galactapedia, ARC star map.
Yeah.
Where are we at with integration?
Where are we at with integration? Well, we are making progress, but I can't give you any dates.
Of course not.
Yeah, I can't give you any dates.
I would have taken it back if you
Yeah,
did.
but the thing about the way we built it is that integration in the future will be easier than if we had built it separate. So Turbulent made sure to put in a backdoor area where they can easily hook up the code that exists in the system, the system they built from scratch for us, by the way, like to our specifications. It'll be easier for our devs on the inside at Cloud Imperium to just hook them all together, just Star Map and Moby Class.
Turbulent did a great job.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, round of applause for them as well.
Yeah, Turbulent, absolutely.
Oh, you guys did it. Thanks.
Now, I'm going to go back here while we're waiting for some questions. We're waiting for Sean here.
We can take questions for Sean as well.
Yeah, sure.
Imperator Costigan is based on Orwin.
Who?
Now, Orwin.
Never heard of
Now, Orwin is one of the founders of the company. How did that come about? Do you remember?
Yes. So I don't know if you guys remember the time capsules from 2012. We basically, when we were talking out that we were going to do those as like a daily drop thing and we needed graphics for them, we basically organized a shoot in Chris's living room and basically shot all of the pictures, the live people pictures that appeared in those in one afternoon. And so basically there's like just a bunch of people came over, and so Orton was there. And I found in a military surplus store an old Russian, like a 1960s Russian officer jacket that I was like, this looks weird. And so I just bought it. And so
Of course you did.
And yeah, so that was that.
Yeah.
That's a quintessential Dave Haddock story.
Yes.
All right, we got somebody else for a question.
Hey there, just something quick. So Galactapedia looks awesome, I must say.
Thank you.
So myself and some others, we work on several wikis that are part of the community. There's a French one, there's Star Citizen tools, there's several out there. Are there any plans to work with the community on getting them involved in the Galactapedia, or however that might work?
We are trying to work out a system where we can document fan activities. So that's going to be something that we would like to hear from you about in the coming weeks when we put up our feedback page.
Okay.
But I want to emphasize that this is not meant to replace any of the fan wikis. We will be documenting things from in-universe, so we won't be saying, and then RSI, and then
This ship costs, this much money or whatever.
We won't be saying anything like that, so your work is still valuable.
I appreciate it all, because I definitely use it in my day-to-day job.
Yeah, we use it. Yeah.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I can hear Toast sweating, admitting how much we use the player-run wikis. We do quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you.
Well,
thank you so much, yes.
So we talked about this year-long election cycle that's coming up. You hinted at it here and there. What can you tell us about how it will manifest over the year that we know so far, or that you're already do admit?
In kind of like a ghostly form while you're sleeping.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Is Sean ready?
I mean, it'll be, we'll probably be looking for a bunch of different opportunities. I mean, the classic one will be kind of news updates, the various, TV shows and magazines and stuff like that, kind of talking about it. Kind of similar to what we did with like the Polo Initiative and all that stuff, where we kind of have it cross among, jump point articles and news updates and, whatever we can basically kind of hook into. And we'll try and, work with the community team to kind of see what we can do, community initiatives to try and incorporate that into it.
Yeah.
And now we'll have the Galactapedia in order to put bios up of all the candidates.
Yeah.
And
We already have a Kilos Costigan article.
Well, and the fun thing too is that if the younger Costigan wins, then we can still use Ortwin.
We can, yeah.
We're just going to draw a little mustache on, and we're going to
it'll be like, it's fine.
We have another question.
Hello.
Hey there. So we talked a little bit earlier about how players would be able to affect the elections in-game. Now, these different imprinters will be running on different platforms, right? Mm-hmm. So will the players selecting their different candidates and their different platforms and even choosing a candidate, if that's how it ends up manifesting, will that affect the direction of lore and events in-game? Can it go in different directions depending on what we choose?
I mean, I think that'll be the thing that we kind of really take a look at. I mean, it's always been the conversation that, like, how do we figure out how to have the universe kind of shift in ways that might be unexpected to us?
It's kind of like how we've talked about the NPC population, and it's kind of this buffer that we have in the Star Citizen universe, where you as players represent a percentage of the population. So you have an important voice, but it's not the only voice. And so it's going to be influenced it, but if everyone in this room decided one thing, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it's going to go. It just means that that's an important perspective that we're gonna hear.
Which in short means sorry to Bodie McBoatface.
Yeah, he was my favorite, but he has no chance.
Okay. Sorry, I was somebody talking in my ear.
How you doing, Jared?
Hey, good. I'm trying to think of a way to convince you to let me run for Imperator.
You just gotta get 1,000 signatures.
Yeah, 1,000 signatures.
I've got a very strong platform. My platform would be put sandworms on every planet.
Okay. Yes, good.
Put the bathrooms back in the Cutlass.
Okay.
Bathrooms!
When you think about it, isn't the whole thing a bathroom?
I guess anywhere is a bathroom if you really want it to be.
The thoughts and opinions of Will Weissbaum do not represent those of Scientific Games, Harbor Space Industries, or its subsidiaries. Next question.
Hi.
Hello.
I was just wondering about the lifespan of Tevarin. And if they live for not long enough, is it still deep into the hearts, the massacre of their ancestors?
Oh, that's a good question. We haven't really talked lifespan, have we?
No, they're about on average with humans.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think of all the alien civilizations, Teverin have a lot of kinship with us as far as like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, because they still breathe our atmosphere, hence so they can exist on our planets. I mean, as far as how many of them are still kind of carrying around the defeats from the first two wars, that probably depends on the Tevarin that you talk to. I mean, probably 20 years ago, probably not many, that there would be very few and far between. Most of them would just be ignoring the world and, just making money and, drinking and whatnot. But now, I mean, with the sort of resurrection of the culture, it's possible that, there's a handful of them that are kind of upset with the kind of raw deal that they got. So, and that's also, as we were mentioning earlier, I mean, that's what the concern is with a lot of people with this sort of, Tyrannus 3 enclave of diaspora, like whether they're a bunch of disgruntled Tevarin who are basically going to try and arm up and launch another insurgency.
Yeah.
They're horrified at that. So, but yeah, I mean, with most of the stuff in Star Citizen, I mean, the beautiful thing is like you can kind of take it on a character by character basis. There's kind of room for all the different types to exist in there and stuff. So yeah, there's definitely probably some Tevarin out there that are pretty pissed off.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
All right, we got time for one more.
It's you.
It's you.
Oh, I hope this is a really good question.
With the careers and things going forward, sort of media, so forth, and with all the Galactapedia tied to the Ark and the library.
Yes.
If things don't get reported or people destroy all the data running ships, is it possible some things won't turn up there just because the information hasn't got out from where it happened?
Yes. Like a lot of libraries, and archives and history, it depends on who reports it, who remembers it, how much information that's out there is available. So while the mission of the Ark and the mission of Galactapedia is to document all known knowledge in the universe, there will necessarily be some gaps based on just how information works and how things are remembered and how things are documented. So if, for example, there's a massacre on a planet and everyone dies and the only person who's around to report it is on a ship that gets destroyed on the way to reporting it, it's unlikely that people are going to know exactly what happened because the information is just gone.
Yeah.
I think a big part of Star Citizen's lore is the idea of imperfect information. Like right now in gameplay, you can kind of see it with turning off the comm relays in order to create a blackout zone where crimes aren't reported until it's reactivated, or we're in talks about recovering black boxes and all this kind of stuff. And with hopefully future careers with people running in the media ships, the news vans, and the data runners.
And the notion of time decay as information has to travel between system to system.
Yeah, and one of the things in archives specifically is a notability standard. So like, if today you had a receipt, like a receipt from a cup of coffee that you got, that wouldn't be notable enough to put in an archive, even though it's something that happened today.
It was a really good cup of coffee.
It was a great cup of coffee.
Good, yeah.
But so stuff like that wouldn't necessarily make it to the Galactapedia, but maybe an article about the type of coffee, if it's popular enough, would be in the Galactapedia. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
One other thing.
Sure.
How big are the relate return fines if you...
They're so big.
They send bounty hunters after you.
Yeah.
That's going to be gameplay.
They're not afraid to kill.
Oh man, library
Thank
bounty
you.
hunters.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, thanks so much, guys. Dave, Will, Cherie, thank you so much for taking the time.